When cows and sheep began disappearing in a small northern Russian village, the locals decided to organize a wolf hunt. The hunters built a huge cage and trapped an entire pack inside, condemning the wild animals to a slow death by starvation. No one could have imagined that a simple village teenager would dare to release the predators. But the most amazing thing happened afterward. The behavior of the freed wolves shocked everyone. In the early 1980s, in the small village of Zarechia, lost among ancient pines and spruces, life followed its usual course. Local residents, like their ancestors, engaged in farming, kept livestock, and cultivated the unyielding northern soil. The village had about 50 households, and each family maintained their own farm: cows, sheep, chickens. It was a time when people still lived in close connection with nature, although they didn't always understand its laws. Problems began in late summer when animals started disappearing from the common herd. First, a young sheep vanished, then a calf, and a week later an adult cow went missing. Nikolai Petrovich, the shepherd who had worked in his position for over 20 years, had never encountered such a situation. He swore that he had only stepped away for a minute to eat lunch, and when he returned, the animal was gone. Anxiety and fear began to spread through the village. At the town meeting, locals heatedly discussed the events. Someone remembered seeing wolf tracks near the village outskirts. Others spoke of howling they'd heard at night. The decision came quickly. They needed to organize a wolf hunt. Among the local men were many experienced hunters, and soon a volunteer group was formed. In this same village lived 15-year-old Alexei, the local carpenter's son. A quiet and thoughtful teenager, he had shown a special connection with nature since childhood. While other boys chased cats and destroyed birds' nests, Alexei fed stray dogs and treated injured birds. His father, seeing his son's affinity for animals, often took him to the forest, teaching him to understand nature, read tracks, and listen to forest sounds. The wolf hunt continued for several weeks. Each morning, the group of hunters would head into the forest, often returning with their prey. But for some, simply shooting the predators wasn't enough. The collective farm chairman suggested building a large cage and keeping the captured wolves in the village to intimidate other predators and serve as a warning to locals. Soon a massive cage made of thick metal bars appeared on the village outskirts. Over the next few days, the hunters, using clever traps, managed to catch 7 wolves, almost an entire pack. Among them was a large gray wolf, clearly the leader, 2 female wolves, and 4 young wolves. The imprisonment of wild animals became a sort of entertainment for the villagers. People would come specifically to look at the captured predators, some bringing their children to show them the enemies. Those who had lost livestock were especially zealous. They could stand for hours by the cage, taunting the animals and banging sticks against the bars. Alexei couldn't bear to watch this. Each day, passing by the cage, he saw the wolves becoming more exhausted and hungry. They were fed rarely and poorly, mostly with scraps and spoiled food. In the animals' eyes, he saw not anger but fatigue and despair. One day, when no one was around, the teenager dared to approach the cage with a piece of bread. The wolves, instead of showing expected aggression, regarded him with cautious interest. They took the offered bread, and from then on, Alexei began regularly feeding them. Gradually, a unique bond formed between the boy and the wolves. The animals recognized him from afar, approaching the bars when he came near. The plan to free the wolves didn't come to Alexei immediately. He long contemplated various options, understanding he risked bringing the entire village's wrath upon himself. But seeing the animals weaken each day, he decided to act. Choosing a moment when most hunters were in the forest and the village was quiet, he took his father's tools and went to the cage. The work proved harder than he'd expected. The metal bars were thick and strong, but persistence and desperation gave him strength. All this time, the wolves behaved remarkably calmly, as if understanding what was happening. They gathered in the far corner of the cage and waited patiently. When the last bar was broken and an opening large enough for a wolf to squeeze through appeared, Alexei stepped back several paces. Only then did real fear grip him. He was alone with 7 hungry predators. The wolves slowly emerged from the cage. They surrounded the teenager but showed no aggression. The pack leader, that same large gray wolf, approached Alexei. The boy froze, feeling his heart pounding. The wolf carefully sniffed his hands, still smelling of iron and rust, and began to lick them. This was not a gesture of submission, but of gratitude. After this, the wolf made a soft sound like a growl, and the entire pack, following their leader, slowly headed toward the forest. At the forest's edge, the wolves stopped as if saying goodbye, and the gray leader looked one last time at his savior before dissolving among the trees. News of the wolves' escape stirred up the village. People feared the predators' revenge, expecting new attacks on livestock. But time passed, and the wolves showed no aggression. They were seen in the surrounding forests, hunting wild animals but never approaching the village herds. Alexei kept his secret for many years. He often thought about that encounter with the wolves, about the leader's gaze full of wisdom and dignity. This story changed his life. Later, he became a renowned biologist, dedicating himself to studying and protecting wild animals. This remarkable story teaches us that nature is far more complex and wiser than we tend to think. Wolves, typically considered merciless predators, showed nobility and gratitude. They didn't seek revenge on humans for their suffering, and perhaps thanks to one person's kindness, they were able to forgive others' cruelty. The incident in that distant northern village reminds us that true humanity isn't shown through dominion over nature, but in the ability to live in harmony with it. And sometimes it's children, unburdened by adult prejudices, who can teach us this simple truth. Many years have passed since then, but in those parts they still tell the legend of wolves who knew how to be grateful and of a boy who wasn't afraid to follow his heart's call. This story became part of local folklore, passed down through generations as a reminder that kindness and mercy can overcome any boundaries, even those that separate the world of humans from the world of wild animals.